Hello and welcome to ClapperCast. I'm your host as always, Carson Timar, and today to celebrate the real-life Midsommar, myself and Hilary White are jumping back to 2019 to revisit Ari Aster's Midsommar, one of the biggest A24 horror films to date. This movie took the world by storm back in 2019, and today we are happy to revisit it, really break down why we find the film so compelling, and also discuss how the film changes and morphs between the theatrical and director's cut. I really liked this episode. I was really thrilled to revisit this film ahead of Ari Aster's Eddington later this summer, and I think we have a pretty fun episode today. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the podcast. Now let's get to our review of Midsommar. Okay, Hilary, thank you so much for joining me, and happy Midsommar. Of course, we're doing this on the actual day, of course, to discuss Ari Aster's Midsommar. Maybe you could say even a bit of a preview for Eddington later this year. We'll get there when we get there. I'm super excited to get into this because I believe we both have seen at least the theatrical cut. We've both seen the director's cut now, and I think there's a lot to discuss. I'll say just like a little preview on my rewatch. I was kind of blown away by a lot here and how much there was to discuss. But first, I'm going to turn it over to you first. What is your history with Midsommar? Again, have you seen both versions? And then just what are your overall thoughts on the film?
I'm trying to remember exactly how I found out about this film. And I think it may have just, all I remember is the trailer. I saw the trailer for it and it was so odd. I knew immediately that this was going to be a different film because it was just so sunny and almost like bleach washed. I almost want to say whitewashed, but it's like everything is so bright and sunny. And I sent it to a few people. It said, hey, there's this movie coming out. What is this? This looks interesting. That's like all I knew about it. And I haven't watched the trailer recently, so I don't remember it 100%. I don't think it gives hardly anything away. It just shows a bunch of images and you're just, I don't know, intrigued. So I went and saw it with a friend and we kind of left and we thought, wow. We were kind of beyond words. And I did recommend it to some people. One person did watch it and then they sent me a video of them reacting to it. And it was like them like scarfing ice cream on their couch, trying to feel better because it's just one of those kind of movies. And I did eventually see the director's cut, but that was a while later. I think this may have been my fourth or fifth time seeing the film, which when I looked at it, I thought like, yeah, I've seen this one the most. But I have to say by far, it's my favorite Ari Aster film. I did not see Beau Was Afraid. I'm really not interested in Eddington. And I'm just not. I like Hereditary was okay, although I looked it up on Letterboxd and I gave it 2.5 stars. And I thought, I don't remember disliking this movie, but it seems really low, a really low score. And other than that, I've seen a lot of his short films. Honestly, if people listening to this have not seen his short films, if you want to see some really fucked up stuff, he has some incredibly fucked up shorts. Just things that I can't put into words. So that's my my relationship with this movie. This is my favorite of his stuff. Haven't really cared about anything since. I don't know. That's open to change, I suppose. But at the rate that things are going, I don't know. Maybe we have another Peter Bogdanovich in our hands. I really don't know. I hope not. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. But it's like the last couple, it's been very divisive. People don't like it. I don't know. What's your relationship to this movie, Carson?
No, I think you can skip all of his newer stuff. I liked Midsommar when I first saw it back in 2019. I can't believe it's like 6 years ago this movie came out in theaters. And I saw the theatrical cut a couple times since then. Always appreciated the film. Never like quite felt like I loved it, but I did watch the director's cut for the first time. And also for context, and this is going to be a fun like personal slice to this all. I'm about 2 or 3 weeks removed from a pretty terrible breakup. So a weird vibe to walk can do this film with. Definitely did not think about that. And then when it started, I was like, oh, this is going to be an interesting watch. But I'll say I love this on a rewatch, especially the director's cut. And we'll get there, I'm sure, later on, the actual differences between the cuts. But this is also my favorite Ari Aster. Granted, I really like Hereditary. I think, especially on a rewatch, really fell in love with that film. Also, everything else has just been shit since then. Do not watch Beau's Afraid. Do not listen to Jack. It's not good. It's terrible. Literally a crime of nature. One of the worst films I've ever seen in my life. But there's so much here that is so strong that is worth discussing, getting into, especially with the director's cut. And I think maybe let's start very briefly with a discussion on the two cuts. Director's cut is much less ambiguous, I would say. I think the theatrical cut, and I'm curious what you think also, I'd recommend people start with theatrical cut because you really dives you in there. It's like a bad trip of drugs, where you just are completely lost. You don't know what's happening alongside these characters. Things seem off, but there's other personal dramas happening. I think how the film balances itself as like a horror film where all this fucked up shit is happening, but also such a tight personal drama. Very, very well done. The experience is definitely more off kilter with, I think, the theatrical cut. The director's cut for me really fleshed out this world, especially if you know what's happening. And this is why I'd recommend people go experience the theatrical cut, then jump to the director's cut. Because there's a lot of really, really brilliant character work here. There's a lot of really brilliant setup with this world and the things happening within it. I guess maybe it's just best we say spoiler warning. Let's spoil this film. It's an older film at this point. I think everyone has seen it. But super, super emotionally powerful, this character of Danny, and how especially I think the director's cut really fleshes out just how tragic of a character that is. And then within that, you get a ton of brilliant conversations we'll get into as far as gender, as far as relationships, as far as grief, as far as a lot in the director's cut, especially about how like extremist groups target people who are emotionally damaged or going through emotional trauma, who feel alone, and how it preys on those vulnerable individuals and brings them into their group or cult or whatever you want to say, especially with modern politics. That's super relevant. Just a lot here. But I guess I'm curious on your front, because I know you've seen them. Which version do you prefer? And I guess how would you recommend people, I guess, tackle this film?
Well, I agree with you. I think that starting with the theatrical cut is the way to go. I have seen the director's cut, but I'm going to disclose I haven't seen it recently, so it's not fresh in my mind. I do remember bits and pieces of it that I probably should have revisited before this conversation, but I ran out of time. But as far as preference, I actually like the theatrical cut more because the ambiguity makes it so much scarier. Um, and I think that to a certain degree, it kind of it elicits some more conversations afterwards about the characters and about like, did so and so, like, we see a lot of things happen. Did so and so deserve this kind of treatment? All around. And I think the director's cut makes that a lot less ambiguous and makes things a lot more cut and dry. It's like, this is what our main character is dealing with. And once that becomes clear, the end point of the film seems a lot more justified. Whereas in the theatrical cut, it's like, this is just all very gray. It's not black and white. It's very messy. Maybe gray isn't the right word. It's just extremely messy. And the one thing I do want to bring up, and I've talked to people about this and I haven't gotten an answer. I don't remember seeing any subtitles when I went and saw this film. And the theatrical cut I just have a cut of it. It doesn't have any translations for what people are saying in Swedish, which really adds to the experience of, if I was in Danny's shoes, I wouldn't be able to understand what these people are saying to each other. In the director's cut, whenever someone shows up and starts speaking Swedish, there are subtitles. And that really, really fleshed out things like you mentioned before, as far as like, exactly what these people are saying at all times. But I'm not sure about that. Do you remember subtitles in the theatrical cut?
No, not in the theatrical, but yes, in the director's cut.
Okay. Didn't
Yeah.
hallucinate that.
Right, with this movie, you never know, I guess, what you're
Mm-hmm.
hallucinating. I didn't even really think, because I'm very opposite to you. I just saw the director's cut. I haven't seen the theatrical cut, I want to say, since like 2020. So it's been a hot second since I've seen the film, but I didn't even really register that change. I think for me, the director's cut does two big things. Number one, it makes the people around Danny, who she's traveling with, to be the worst people in the fucking world. True. I mean, they're already terrible in the theatrical cut, but as you mentioned, there's really no saving those characters or trying to justify or have a conversation with them as far as like what are they going through, which I think works. I think especially her boyfriend gets a lot more content, a lot more depth as far as what he's going through. I think it also helps like transform Danny to just be like and I don't mean to sound bad, but like she is in such a pathetic state where she is just so desperate to be held and touched, to where you like really see like, what are you doing, girl, in Sweden? Like it really transforms that character. I think for me, Florence Pugh, phenomenal. Also, we got to mention, it is
Mm-hmm.
so sad seeing, well, not sad, it's interesting seeing her work now, and people point to like Thunderbolts, for example, as be like, oh my god, she's so incredible, where it's like, no, I watching this film, she transforms on screen. She is phenomenal in this movie. But it really villainizes those characters a lot more, which I think works for me. What it also does, as you mentioned, is it really explains, and I think also I mentioned earlier, but it explains this cult, it explains what's happening, and it transforms this movie in a pretty significant way, I would say, to where it felt, in my opinion, on the director's cut, a lot more horror adjacent. Paul Schrader wrote, and a lot of controversy there, we won't get into today, but just FYI, mixed bag.
Yep.
But he wrote that he had an issue with this movie on release, I assume through the theatrical cut, where he said this movie is smart characters doing a lot of dumb things. And that's true. And it's very like horror. It feels like a slasher in that way, where it's just these characters who, almost to an absurdist degree, these things are happening. People are disappearing around them. It gets to a point where it's almost like literally like it's like the final girl and the final boy, where they're sitting there and everyone else they came with is gone. And you're like, why are you still there? This is insane. But I think by really always focusing like all this horror stuff, and this is why it's a really interesting design film, it's all in the background because these characters are constantly within their personal drama with each other and trying to feel validated and trying to feel seen. And he wants to feel validated in academia, so he's going to do this for his thesis project, and he has a lot of jealousy, and that's all like present in the theatrical cut. But I think in the director's cut, it really nails that on its head, where I felt like this is one of the few times within the horror genre there's a group like this that, yes, these are smart characters making super, super dumb decisions. And at the end, when, it just literally, it feels like they wake up, especially the boyfriend, and he sees, oh my God, like this is actually what's happening all around me. This is crazy. It's one of the few times it felt justified to me, to where that never bothered me. I feel like it does a great job justifying why these people are so consumed by their emotions and why they're not more concerned with the absurdist, almost horror elements around them. I don't know, did that ever bother you with either cut, that these guys stayed and were making these decisions?
Well, I thought about it a little bit. And here's the thing, watching a film, it can be, we have a privilege that the characters don't. We know so much more. We know everything, or we know at the very least 10 times more than these characters do. And it's only in retrospect, most of the time in our lives, where we look back and we think, wait a minute, you know, that was really dumb. So part of it is their age, part of it is the characters and how they are. Um, I mean, all of them are, it kind of seem to come from like a background where things like this don't really happen to them, or things just wouldn't occur to them. Like they're not equipped to sense danger or anything that's off. And they're very much kind of there, like their attitude at the beginning of the film when they talk about going is very much like, well, everything is there for our taking. So, for example, like Mark just leaving with that girl, where she says, come with me. I'll show you. You know, her English is very limited, and he just leaves with her. I've had discussions with male friends about this kind of behavior, where I see something like this and I'll tell them about it and I'll say, this makes men look really dumb. And they will actually tell me, no, we actually are that dumb. So, like a move like that, as depressing as that as that admission might be for my male friends. We're like, no, we actually need friends with us to be like, yeah, I don't think you should do that. Don't do that. Don't go in the woods with somebody. It might not be sex. But like, for example, what was William Jackson Harper's character's name, like Josh's, like that is kind of a slasher move, but it makes sense within the context of story that he would steal out at night and start taking photographs of things. As far as like the stupidity of the characters, it all kind of made sense to me because it's people in their 20s who are Americans who sometimes like go on these tourism trips and they really think like everything is just going to be like the way it is at home and that, nothing bad is going to happen to them. And they believe what they're being lied to all the time too. And if you think about certain phases in your life, you're dealing with people who are lying to you all the time and you just believe them as well, except here the stakes are much higher. So I didn't have that problem. I guess that's the short answer, where it's like everything that people do, that the characters do in this film makes sense to me, even when it's dumb.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that also goes to Aster's writing. I'll be very blunt. I think this is the best Aster's ever been with both writing and directing.
Hmm.
Again, I think these characters are really, really quite layered within their own struggles. But the directing here, I like the visuals, the iconography. This is one of the few films of this nature I think that's really stuck around in like the conversation and the zeitgeist, if you will, where like there's a lot of these great horror films, even something like Hereditary, which was really celebrated and loved at the time. Very few have stuck around quite like Midsommar. And I don't know if it's probably a mixture of a lot of things, right? It's a mixture that it's all in the day, so it looks really unique. Everything has such a wonderful texture to it. These sets are real, these costumes are real. It just feels so much more iconic because of that. But this is one that I also appreciate, just like the visuals so much. There are so many times where this looks incredible. But if you want to watch the director's cut at home, I'll say you can buy it on iTunes. And at least that version, I want to say it's probably 4K, whatever iTunes has. It looks stunning. The sound design is also incredible. I will say that's one sad thing, is it's like, this is definitely one that I think is best in the theater. Definitely, I feel like from watching it from home, you can tell that in certain ways where it's like, oh, this was a real theatrical experience. But no, I also just really appreciated like Aster's work here as a director. Again, far better than I think his work in Hereditary, that I think is strong, but I think is growing in many ways. And then I think he's just gone full, you know, this direction afterwards. But this does feel like a sweet spot to me.
Yeah, this is my favorite thing he's done by far, and I should probably go revisit Hereditary at some point. It is interesting, though. I think at least in the conversations that have happened around me, Midsummer isn't mentioned as much, but Hereditary is. It seems that movie just comes up a lot, and it seems to be a lot of people's favorite horror films, or favorite horror film. And there's things about it that I remember liking, um, and talking about with other people. So yeah, I'm still kind of scratching my head about why I gave it such a low score. There must have been something in there that just didn't jive with me or something. But by far, this one, and I think this is probably a cue for us to get more into it about why it's so compelling to the two of us, because that's what it boils down to, especially because you just went through you said like a messy, not good breakup. That's Watching something like this can be very healing in a weird way, considering how it ends, but at the same time, just difficult. So I'm curious about what your experience was as far as like, what did you see this particular time in the director's cut, considering what you've just gone through?
Yeah, I mean, the ending is definitely a little bit of a booyah moment in this, in certain emotional states. It's definitely like you go queen, like burn his ass. But more so than that, I thought it was an interesting, really compelling look. Um, on like an outside reflection. I don't want to be too negative on it, but like at when you're going through grief, when you're going through that struggle, where you lose someone close to you, someone you, and obviously in this case it was a death. In my case, it's a breakup. I think both are applicable. Where if you lose that someone who you felt close to, who you felt seen by, who you trusted, um, and the state you go in from that, of just how, what really stuck out to me genuinely was just like, I looked at Danny and I look at how I've been to certain friends and how I've been this past 3 weeks in so many ways. And it's like, wow, like you really like just are so desperate there, and it's so sad when no one like holds you, or no one cares that you're in the state, or no one is supporting you, and you just feel all alone. I think the film does a great job. Again, one thing, especially in the director's cut, there's a lot here. Never expected, like, Midsommar was about, like, had ties to talking about Nazis and all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff. That's very like out of nowhere in the director's cut. I don't know if it's in the theatrical cut. I wanted to rewatch it, didn't get a chance to,
I don't
but I
think
was
I
like,
don't think it is, but like I know there's a shot of a book that once he, I can't believe I forgot Josh is holding
yeah, Josh
that
is
has like
holding.
the Nazi symbolism in this particular
Well,
community.
and then I was deep diving, because I was just like, it's really weird that we focus on this Nazi book, and they, like, in the director's cut especially, they talk about it and everything. So I was like, that's very interesting. And then I was deep diving online, and it turns out like this community in a lot of their ruins has like Nazi symbols, and like I felt like I was on one hand going down like an Alex Jones like conspiracy theory, where it was like, it's all about Nazis, but then also the director was like, yeah, they're racist and they're kind of like Nazis, and I was like, I did not know this was here. This is so weird. But like, it was so interesting to me seeing how different people can interact and engage with someone going through that grief. And again, it really stuck out to me when you look at Scientology and you look at politics just in general now. It really just hit me, like, if we're looking at this group as being some type of fascist group, and again, I feel like I'm like a conspiracy theorist, like, the towers couldn't have burned at that rate. It doesn't melt steel. Like, I feel like I'm that person right now. But reading it through that lens, super, super interesting look at like that side of things. So I don't know, like, I guess that kind of gets off track with what you were trying to say. But I think how this film projects grief, and specifically how those around you in the world can use that grief and use that state of needing to be held, I guess is the simplest way I would say. That really resonated with me, but also, yes, very satisfying for him to get zipped up in a bear suit and then burned alive. Like, I'll be honest.
Yeah, I've never quite gotten there myself, and it has surprised people sometimes. I won't get into it. It's not in romantic relationships, but sometimes people, say like, "Don't you wish that person was dead?" And really serious conversations, and I've been like, "No, I've never thought about that." Um, and it is a movie. I mean, and I think that's probably like the most satisfaction that someone can get out of it is that they know that this is not real. But you're not the first person I've heard enjoying the end because they've also had a shitty partner. And I think that Ari Aster wrote this in the wake of a breakup. I remember reading that somewhere that he had a really horrible breakup and that Midsummer was his way of processing it, which, considering his output, shouldn't surprise anyone at all. Um, I hope that whoever he was in a relationship with did not hear that because I would be scared. Um, but I mean, as far as like addressing like the fascism angle, that is very true, and especially watching it this time, I think it's not the first time I've paid attention to this, which is it's about someone who has just survived a family annihilation, and not only that, it's a family annihilation by a sibling, which you don't hear about as much. It usually is a parent or uh, one of the parents in the family who eradicates a family, not a sibling, and how unbelievably just I can't even put into words what that would be like for someone to go through. And she's left in this existence. I did note that this time she does have a phone call with a female friend in the beginning, and I wrote down like that female friend is like a threat that's out there that actually could be used in a discussion about what might happen after, the credits roll. But she doesn't have a support system. She doesn't have anyone looking out for her. She doesn't, and it kind of is implied that she never did. The way that she treats things is like you said, she's so desperate to be a part of things and not cause trouble, and just she'll take anything that she can get as far as like a relationship, even if it's not good for her. And that implies things about her family. It implies things about how she was raised and maybe how she had to handle things, very much, being a peacekeeper or an accommodator because of what was happening with her parents and her sister. The fact that she's living on her own and her sister lives at home speaks volumes. And that whole opening sequence, I just want to get that out of the way. That sequence is so scary because it's one of those examples of a director showing you something and you think you know what you're looking at, and then you realize you're looking at something else. You're looking at corpses at the beginning of the film. You think they're asleep, but they're not. And so you already feel discombobulated, and just you know that things are just going to be bad for this character in general. But if you're surrounded by people who don't care about you, that makes things worse. And it also brings in, that fascism angle. And I can't really say with authority, but I've seen enough interviews and documentaries about how this kind of recruitment works. What makes Midsummer a little bit more interesting is it's going for a cult angle, but as far as like recruiting for extremist groups in America, there are men who are recruiters who look around for young men who are down on their luck, who don't feel special. Maybe they're unemployed. They don't have stable home lives. They didn't graduate high school and they don't have an identity. They're scared. They're lost. They're angry. And they start feeding them this line about like, this is the reason why you are the way you are, and that's how the recruitment happens. It's like, we'll be your family, we love you, and like everyone else, it's everyone else that's the enemy, anyone who's not like us. And Midsummer's different than that. It is like this cult situation, although in this, I don't know, there was just something about this go around where I was watching what was happening in this cult and I was like, this cult sucks. Did you get that feeling too? Where I was just like, think about it, like other than the camaraderie and having a family, it's like what they do from day to day. It's like this sucks. I don't know. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I would agree with you. Like, granted, I think most cults kind of suck and are boring. I'm, I don't think I'm going to be recruited into a cult anytime soon. Yeah, it definitely had an interesting angle as far as that goes. But also, like, I get if you, and specifically, looking at Danny's character and what she needs, and this entire cult at every point is about, sharing these emotions, reflecting these emotions. Also, I don't know if you watched the rehearsal. There was some like weird parallels to the rehearsal, even season 2 of the rehearsal on this, as far as how it feels to be surrounded by people going through the same experience. In the rehearsal, for anyone who hasn't seen, there's an episode where Nathan Fielder is trying to get this guy to ask a girl out, and decides to try to up his confidence by having like 20 actors, let's say, surround him and do the same thing so he's not alone. Very much so what this cult is doing in a lot of ways emotionally. But I get why Stanny, who feels so isolated, feels so alone, doesn't understand what's happening, is going to gravitate to the shared emotional state of these people who are grieving with her, holding her, showing her she's not alone. It definitely also is an interesting when we talk about recruitment, because again, it is a very different demographic than a lot of what I think cult recruitment is looked at. I also will say it did, this film since release, there's been a couple of parts of it that maybe have been critically thought about, let's say, and critically discussed. And one of them is kind of with horror, obviously having like folk horror goes back decades and decades, but are we projecting this outside community, this foreign community, as being inherently evil because of their strange traditions? I appreciate that if we go down the rabbit hole that this is somewhat fascist related, I think it clears up that issue for me pretty quickly. So I appreciate that, I guess. I will say one conversation in this that I was still a little bit troubled by, and it's not really the focus of this, is some of the conversations around mental health, specifically at the beginning with her sister, Danny's sister, who is bipolar, and as you mentioned, wipes out this family. I would I'd recommend anyone go check out Logan Kenny's review of this film. I think he's, number one, just brilliant overall and has great opinions on things. But they really do a deep dive into how this could be a damaging perception of a character, a damaging read for a character, a damaging portrayal of mental health. It is something that I think in all three of his films, every film kind of gets worse than the last one as far as showing some of these issues. With Hereditary, it was very much so generational trauma. Here, it's very much so bipolarness and mental health issues in that front. Beau's Afraid goes, again, way deep on it. I still think that character, for me, I did feel a little bit like it was underwritten and maybe unjust. Again, it's not the focus per se. It's not like they keep going back to blaming mental illness or villainizing mental illness, but it is the one part of the film where I feel like it really could have been cleaned up a bit. How did that relate? Did that bother you at all in a watch, or?
Uh, I have to admit, no. I wrote down Logan Kenny. I'm gonna watch then after we we wrap this up. But I know people who are bipolar, and just to put this out here, anyone's listening, I've known people who are bipolar. They're not violent people. But any kind of mental illness that manifests in somebody, it can manifest in a person who can be violent, but it's not necessarily the condition they have that will lead to an extreme family annihilation. I think for me personally, I think what resonated with me was not so much this girl's mental illness. It's more about, there's in my mind, it's like there's so many other factors that probably led to her doing this. There's little bits and pieces of things, sewn in there, as far as like conversations that Danny has with other characters about how she treated things. Like I've said, I've known people who have had this disorder, and they aren't manipulative. They aren't, constantly, having like crying out for help or threatening suicide or things like that seem to be implied with her sister, which shows me, I mean, that suggests to me that like the bipolar is diagnosis is not the problem. It's not the problem with this character. It's something else. The fact that she's still living with her parents, the fact that there's only one flashback of her where like she's on the couch and she looks at Danny. There's some sibling dynamics that are incredibly uncomfortable, where sometimes there is a family where a sibling becomes very fixated on control and getting everything. I can't explain where that pathology comes from. It's very confounding, and especially in a movie like this where we don't have a lot of information. This might just be a theory that I'm going on, but it does really seem that this character is very, possessive of the parents. She still lives at home. She needs to have attention at all times. She's done attention seeking behavior like this before in order to make sure that everything revolves around her. To the point where I think that the way I kind of saw it was, this is a character who doesn't, it may have come from despair, especially considering the last message she sends to Danny. Everything is black. I'm taking my parents with me, our parents with me. Goodbye. Something along those lines. But the way I see that act is like, I'm going to take everything from you. Everything. And that to me is not associated with bipolar disorder whatsoever. That is something else. And what's scary about that character in particular is this does seem to be someone who's had control and gotten her way her whole life, and that's still not enough. And how easy it is, how easy it was to kill herself and her parents. I think that's what's so terrifying about that opening sequence. I don't want to, I'm almost at the point of saying like, it's probably one of the most effective openings to a film I've ever seen. It's extended. It takes a while. And of course, the tapestry at the beginning. I remember seeing it for the first time in the theater, and that tapestry that opens up, it doesn't tell you anything, but I'm like, oh, I bet this is the whole movie. And then if you look at it again, the tapestry, it does tell the whole movie, but it doesn't spoil anything. But I mean, as far as mental health, I think it's very much about this character. Her sister got everything that she wanted and was indulged and indulged and indulged and indulged, and she just became a black hole. And because it was never enough, she could never be satisfied and killed everyone. Whereas in the meantime, we are left with Danny, and Danny got nothing. Yeah. Nothing. And it plays out in the relationship she has with other people, where she'll just she'll give in and be incredibly passive and, negotiate with these people while they walk all over her or don't, value her in any way or give her what she needs. A lot of that behavior, I'm just like, that comes from her family. She didn't
Yeah.
get anything. So she's like someone who's like constantly trying to like grab onto something, just like, I will do anything to keep you here because I just don't want to be alone. And it really does make her prime, target material for this. You mentioned that scene before where they all like cry with her, and
Yeah.
it's this very healing thing where it's like, yes, that would be great to have as therapy, but at the same time, this is the same group of people who manufactured the situation that she landed in right now. They
Yes.
know exactly what they are doing.
Yes, which especially in the director's cut comes through so strongly. And I think that's also one of the brilliant things. Like you mentioned with the tapestry and such, and especially the opening and how chilling it is. On rewatches, the film I think is very valuable to go back and keep revisiting and kind of breaking down these characters and their relationships. But especially in the director's cut where they so openly villainize this place so much more, I think it adds quite a bit of actual complexity to like the morality of certain situations. I know I mentioned already Christian and again, maybe some personal satisfaction with his conclusion here with the bear suit. But really, like he's also like coming at this place quite vulnerable, and they are manufacturing situations to push him to certain degrees to get him to turn on Danny and cheat and blah blah blah. The morality of the film is not a simplistic one. Well, yes, you can blame Christian and those people for being like literally the worst people who ever existed, and being terrible. It doesn't necessarily justify literal murder, but you also can't blame Danny for falling into this trap and being angled this way either. I think by having a villainous threat like this cult that really, or this group, that really, when you directly show they're the ones behind this, they're creating this, they are playing this game in a very like horror villain way. I don't think it simplifies the relation. It doesn't simplify, I guess, the morality. I think it really only adds to it. I appreciate that a lot. And I found myself really debating with the final scene, like, how do I actually feel about Danny's choice? How much blame do I put on her? How much blame do I put on Christian? How much blame do I put on all these elements? How much do I blame Christian even for cheating? I mean, he's been drugged and manipulated into doing this. It's a very rewarding feature. I think earlier you asked, why do we find this so compelling? I think I just keep coming back to the morality within this relationship. And within all these relationships here, and how everyone is pushing each other. There's a lot here to understand and kind of wrestle with in a way that I find really appreciating. I really appreciate it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's something that's come up a lot on other episodes of, this podcast and the other podcasts associated with Clapper is trying to parse out. There's the experience of the film itself, but the conversations you have afterwards are just as important, and sometimes
Yeah.
they can overshadow the film itself. And Midsummer is definitely one of those where there's a lot to talk about. And I think specifically with this one, going to back to what you said about, it seemed like I'm going to be using some buzzwords, but the concept of like consent and control, where you have like I think Danny, especially like Pugh's performance in particular, and I just want to add to what you said earlier. The Florence Pugh I know, I haven't seen her in any of the Marvel movies or the more I guess like mainstream production she's been in, and I have nothing against them. But for example, like I know her from Lady Macbeth or The Wonder. Those are the ones that I've seen, and then of course this one and several other things. She's a very powerful actress, especially the way she plays the last scene where this horrendous act of violence goes down, but you can tell from her performance that she is so unbelievably high up, like up to her eyeballs in drugs, that it's just how you can't, she's not in her right mind to make decisions. And the same could be argued for Christian. We don't even know exactly what they've been given. And I don't know a lot about drugs, so I can only speculate about what they've been put on, um, or what been influenced by, I should say. So as far as like, yeah, coercing someone into like a quasi group sex act, and then also drugging someone to the point where, and then letting them see that act, and completely just putting them in a position of power where like they're completely on another plane of existence, and they make a decision to kill their boyfriend. But I mean, she doesn't know about the ceremony. She doesn't know that there's going to be a fire. She doesn't know like that she doesn't even know her friends are dead and that everyone is being stuffed in there. We know that. So as far as her participation in things, it's like I don't think she even knows what's happening at the end. That's kind of like she kind of knows, but she might also be like, I'm really high right now. This might just be a drug induced hallucination. You know what I mean? And that really brings me to what is going to happen after this. Like, once that high comes down, is she going to belong to these people? And like, what's going to happen after this? That's an entirely different conversation about like what is going to happen to Danny. I mean, it leaves at the perfect moment for a film to end.
Oh yeah.
But man, once those drugs wear off, what is her life? What like, and like also there's a whole bunch of people who've just disappeared. That's going to be reported. Like there's a lot of loose ends that are worth talking about with this. And yeah, it's just going back to what you're saying, like as far as like talking about what happens in the film afterwards. Yeah, it's with this one, it's inevitably like a very complicated and rich conversation to have.
Did you know you could be listening to this episode of ClapperCast early? Well, if you go to our Patreon page, patreon.com/ClapperCast podcast, there are 3 different tiers that you can choose from, each with their own means of support and each with their own means of rewards. You can get access to early episodes, bonus monthly episodes, bonus reviews. You can see our schedule early. Of course, thank you everyone who's already joined us on Patreon, and we hope to see you over there soon. I think some people, I think Logan Kenny mentions this in his review. I've seen quite a few people think that the projection at the end here is this film trying to say that these actions by Danny, her judgment, her actions here are completely valid and justified, and this film is signing off on like, yes, queen. And I don't think that's what the film is projecting at all.
No.
As you mentioned, it's a very rich conversation. Drugs just in general is a huge factor here. There's also like the question of what is this conclusion, right? What actually happens? Is it all a drug induced? It depends, I guess, how you want to view the entire project. But it feels much richer than I think some people are giving it credit for. And it's definitely interesting. I guess, do you how do you feel about it? Do you feel like Danny is justified? What emotions do you get watching that final sequence within the film?
Knowing who Danny is, it's going to destroy her. If she knew, it's like you ordered a bunch of people you hardly know to set your boyfriend on fire, that would devastate her. The fact that she just doesn't know what has been going on. She doesn't know what happened to Simon. We do. She doesn't know what happened to Connie. We do. Mark, Josh, Christian. We know. We know what happened to them. Danny doesn't. And just imagining, considering what we know about her being told or finding out what happened, it's like her life is even more ruined. It's all just, I don't know. I guess like it's funny. I was I was in another conversation about this where it was another film. I think it was one of the Uncut Gem episodes where I think I just kind of, went meta and told the audience, it's like, if you're in a bad relationship, you don't have to kill anybody. Like, no matter what, it's like, just go get on a bus and leave. I know it's not that simple in some situations. I don't want to make it sound like I'm brushing off or simplifying, like a horrible relationship where some people feel like they can't leave. But if you're someone who's just like, I'm having a terrible breakup, my boyfriend cheated on me, I'm going to kill him. I understand that impulse, and it's very, very real. It's a very primal thing, but it's just like, don't do that. That's not going to make anything better. But I mean, as far as like a
me
film,
last night watching it, like, I'm going to murder him. I don't care.
Yeah, but like as far as like that image, because it's so theatrical, and the whole place just like it just crumbles down, and like all those beams are falling, and and she just knows he's dead. Yeah, there's a relief. Like, well, this relationship is over, but it's a movie. It's a movie, guys, and movies are different from real life. I'm sure I mean, I've never thought about killing anybody. I've never wanted to kill anybody really, but I'm sure that some people have killed their partner and they thought it was going to be awesome, and then the second it happens afterwards, they feel terrible. That's what doesn't come out in the court. Is probably like, "Oh my god, what have I done? What who am I as a person?" you know? And that's what I see happening with Danny down the line, where I mean, she didn't
Right.
do it, but she didn't understand.
Yeah. Well, I also the question like, I mean, they're so good at gaslighting. Could she, if she just does not remember that she's on drugs, imagine her emotional state if she comes to and they're like, "Yeah, he left you. By the way, he left you. He
Yes.
drove off.
Hmm.
Like, sorry that happened to you." And she just never knows what happened, and she's just continually gaslit to think that he hurt her in that way. Um, Pretty like awful stuff. I will say there's a lot here about. I mean, we've already covered kind of two big examples of death. I also want to bring up when the elders are jumping off the cliff. And there's a lot here about understanding death and rationalizing death. Immediately my mind went to one of my favorite films of all time, 1958's The Ballad of Narayama, where it was this tradition in Japan, at least within the film. I'm unclear if this is a real one. I know the one in Midsommar is like
Oh,
real,
it's
people did
real.
it.
Hmm.
But they would, when an elder got to the point where they could not provide her food, their child would literally like put them on their back like a backpack and climb them up a mountain and leave them there to die on the mountain. And both of these films are very similar themes, to the point where like I might write a feature on Clapper about it, to be honest. But that scene's also one where like death is such an interesting force here. It's the force of Danny's grief. It is the force of Danny's liberation at the end. But within this community and how they view that, and justifying death as being for this ultimate cause or being this good thing for the community. I also found that conversation to be quite worthwhile and quite haunting in some ways. I mean, I think that entire sequence of the cliffs is like horrifying, especially I don't know if it was just the director's cut. I don't remember all these scenes being so horrifying, especially when you know what's happening and it's so drawn out and it's so gruesome at times. But I thought that scene was very impactful.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I've told people before, it's in my review at Letterbox, that I don't know why, but this moment that ceremony began and I saw two old people show up, I knew it was a suicide ritual. So like for 15 minutes, I think I was the only person in the audience who was just like, ah, like screaming inside, until it finally went down. I was like, I knew it, I knew it. And then of course I looked it up and found out that it was a real thing. Um, just I really don't know why. I felt that down to my bones. Like, I know exactly what this is. And just like the dread building and building and building. So I wasn't surprised when it happened, but it didn't make the horror any less impactful. Um, Personally, for me, I'm all for end of life decisions. If somebody is suffering and sick or old, and they want to take that decision into their own hands and say, like, hey, 72 is a fine age for me. I'm out. That's okay. But this is a cult situation, and the way that they're doing this is just insane with that huge hammer and everything. It's just no, thank you. I mean, it goes back to like this cult sucks. Like, and
No,
there's
and
all
then
this.
like, and then at the end, they really like just display the bodies. I also like, I could not exist in a cult or a neighborhood or community where like we just have a bunch of dead bodies hanging around everywhere. That really got me. Also, I almost threw up at that point.
I guess
You
like
know,
yeah, but I think that you and I, where we are right now, who we are as people, we wouldn't be able to adjust to that. But if you think about, if you're brought up with that as a child, think about all
yeah,
the stuff we've been brought up with since we were kids. Everyone has this, where as you get older, you're like, I can't believe that was normal. Or just like being just being a human being.
yeah,
Certain things go out of fashion, or there's certain things that change. These, like, these little cultural revolutions that happen, where it's like, yeah, maybe don't say that word anymore. And it's like, you've of course you said that word before because the only word you had or something.
yeah.
And it's like, well, now we're adjusting, to just change with the times. with this particular group of people, there's a lot more going on, and I think I appreciated that particularly. I mean, it is one of those films, and we're saying that the same thing over again. We're like, if you watch
Yeah.
this multiple times, you're going to glean different things each time, these little details. Like, for example, there's conversations that suit the film so well because there's two competing characters who are trying to write this thesis, and so they're interviewing people, and there's two conversations. One is about, well, there's the incest taboo, and the guy says, well, we need to bring people, outsiders, in order to procreate. And then there's another conversation with Josh about how they encourage inbreeding so they can have children who are unclouded. There's so much, like, especially like the actually just the sleeping arrangement in that kind of that barn. The fact that everyone sleeps in the same place really um, creep me out, because that does foster an environment where there aren't any boundaries. And if there's incest going on, I mean, there's inevitably sexual abuse happening in this cult. Because, I mean, if they're like, well, we need to have unclouded children, it's like that gives someone who's already deranged free reign to, like, well, I'm going to have sex with my own daughter or my nieces and like everyone, and probably like people just are woken up in the middle of the night to these assaults happening. They just pretend nothing's happening because they're like, well, it's for the cult and we need to have unclouded children or whatever. And then also bringing in outsiders to be sacrificed. I think the only good cover they have is that this happens every 90 years, where it's like, well, yeah, if it was happening too frequently, like the police might catch on. But even so, like maybe this, like, let's say this did happen in 2019 with the way that things just are today with like law enforcement and tracking phones and all this sort of stuff. It's a lot harder to get away with this kind of stuff. So there is a possibility. I mean, it can only exist in the viewers' imaginations that this might be the last time this happens, because
God,
there's
I would hope
just,
so.
yeah, you hope so. As far as like maybe authorities cracking down on this, because there's just too many people who went missing at the same time and they told people where they were going. That's the other thing. They told people where they were going.
Right.
Like, that's, I mean, that's a huge um blind spot on their part. But anyway, I'm getting off track. Do you
No,
say something?
you're right. I also think as far as abuse and stuff, like how drugs are used is very, very interesting as a factor
Mm.
here with like, um, this is obviously a community that is very clear with what they want, and they know how to manipulate people to lower their senses, to confuse them, to get what they want. And a lot here about like our word culture and like
Oh
drugging
yeah.
culture, and just again, I think this I appreciate so much, because I'll be honest, when I watched Beau's Afraid, and I'm not going to get too deep into this, I was really worried because I think it exposes Aster as like kind of a hack when it comes to discussing topics, and bringing depth into certain conversations. And I was so worried revisiting his work after Beau's Afraid, because it felt like Wizard of Oz at the end, where you pull back the curtain and you're like, well, now I see that you're not a wizard. But I feel so differently actually watching this, because it's like, no, it's so sad now. I feel even worse about Beau's Afraid, because no, like there's so much here to break down and discuss. I think to be honest, the only part of this film, at least the director's cut, that really didn't work for me was Will Poulter. Um, to a degree, this is intentional, obviously. He is so over the top, annoying, and disrespectful, and terrible. And again, I know it's his character. I get that there's a purpose here, and I think they clean it up a lot in the theatrical cut. But he just felt like such he went too far into that presence for me. But outside of that, I mean, this is like 3 hours long, and there's so much here that it's reflecting on and meditating on. It so smart. Every rewatch, again, I think really adds to the your understanding of it and your ability to converse about. Like, it really is one that I loved on a rewatch, and I'm so happy to be like validated and liking Ari Aster and having faith that Ari Aster can produce something like this. Hopefully he goes back to something like this in the future, but I certainly, especially on a rewatch, really appreciated the film. I guess maybe getting into final thoughts. Do you have anything left for Midsommar that you would like to discuss, or any last opinions?
Oh, well, let me look here. I think that we've, let's see. Um found I reviewed my notes, and I think that it was very much, I found myself writing the same things over and over again. It's just like, it's like she's so vulnerable. But as far as like the manipulation, maybe we should talk a little bit about Isabella. Is that the guy who recruits them? Is that how you pronounce
Yeah,
his name?
I
I
believe
think it's
so.
Pella. Yeah. Um he seems so kind and unassuming and harmless. And I think to a certain degree, I understand that because I come from a community that's also viewed that way. But um, if you go down that road and end up, in certain corners, you start realizing that there's a lot of things that it's like, kind of like another metaphor. You're like, oh, pulling back the curtain, and it's like you're not a wizard, but it's like I almost kind of like lifting up a rug and realizing like there's an entire like cemetery underneath there and tons of dirt and bodily fluids and stuff, and you're just like, like just you just want to start screaming. That's kind of been my experience about where I've come from, and everything is really clean cut and nice, and everyone is very polite, and just very much the same way as this Pella guy comes across. And there, I think I forgot the scene where he talks to Danny and he says, "I understand what you're going through because my parents died in a fire." There's been a lot of conversations about that, whether his parents were maybe used as I don't know, sperm donors or something, and then burned in a house like the characters at the end of this film. And he was adopted by the cult because he was a child and didn't know any better. But he says to her, "Does he feel like home to you?" When she
Mm,
talks to her about Christian. And there's a lot of strange things going on in there about like, did Pella have feelings for Danny this whole time? um was it wasn't planned for her to go along? What were the discussions about that between him and his communal family about bringing her in? It's and his I'd say the performance is calibrated so well where like you can't read any of that. It's like you don't get any answers, so it's very it makes the movie more enigmatic and
yeah.
complex.
We also get, again, conversing about death and how death operates in this world. One thing that I found really interesting is because with this final sacrifice, because my understanding of it at least, I'm not an expert on this community, but since he brought like the one who turned out to be the queen or the main one that's going to, I guess, ideally stay in this community, he doesn't get burned in that ceremony. The other two who brought people who were just used as sacrifices, they get burned in the community also. So it's like, was there this whole like, is it like a challenge, like who's going to be the one to bring the queen? Like I don't know, it was very a lot, I think, politics there even within this community that I don't necessarily know if I have an answer on, but like at least I'm intrigued by. um
Yeah, I
yeah.
was trying to remember the guy who gets burned at the end. I'm going through the cast because I'm trying to remember. Was it Ingmar who brought in Simon
Yes.
and Connie? And
Yes.
that to me, I mean, the way I read that now is that that was a murder suicide. Like that was so extreme. Like
Yeah.
he wanted to date Connie, it didn't work. She started dating Simon, so he basically manufactures this situation where they get killed and then he kills himself.
There's also a lot of
Holy shit! I mean,
conversation within there about like people of color and like would they
oh,
ever like, that's
absolutely.
all within there. But yes, I would agree with you on that state. But then there's also that scene where he's sitting with Danny. He says, you're the one I was most excited to be here. I was most happy when I heard you were coming." I'm like, "Oh, is that because you wouldn't have burned too?" Like it's very interesting.
Yeah, you can't read like it was because I care about you, or is this something that he's saying to manipulate her, or is it just about winning, being crowned, like as like the VIP at the very end with his the crown he's wearing that's made out of, leaves and stuff. It's very there's so much, and I have to give Ari Aster credit because he creates with Hereditary. I think he creates a family situation where it's like you can use your own experiences to maybe fill in some of the backstory about why these people are the way they are, but it's very, very isolated. With this, it's like a wider community where it's very much just question marks all over the place. And that's what makes it so interesting and, just, yeah, it takes all twists and different twists and turns when you start talking about it because, yeah, we don't have the answers. I'm sure the Aster does. I think that to kind of answer the question about the way his career has gone. And this is something I forget all the time. And then I have to think back to like even things I started knowing when I was 12 or 13, where it's like, oh, this is how the business works. to make your first film or maybe your second film, it's a project you've thought about for a very long time. Maybe these are projects that have been written, over the years, like sometimes a decade. You've really thought through how you want to do this. You know who the characters are and everything, and you make a successful film. We're like, Hereditary was great, made a lot of people, extremely happy and satisfied in the horror and drama category. And then you have then you have this one, Midsummer, which is what it is. I mean, we've been talking about why it's has sustained power today. But what happens is that when you are that successful, that quickly in succession, is that you are working with production companies and other people who are holding the strings of the purse, and they're just like, "What else you got? What else you got? What else you got?" And you usually have several, screenplays floating around or something, and they're not complete, they're not thought through, um, and you rush into things. And I think that maybe with Aster, that is what happened, or it could be one of those situations where it's like, well, I can do whatever I want. And that's also a problem where it's like, no one's going to say anything about what I'm doing now. Considering, Beau is Afraid. I think Eddington, neither of us have seen it. You haven't seen it, right? Okay.
I have not.
No. So we can't weigh in on that. And I still haven't seen Beau is Afraid. I'm just really, really uninterested. I really like dug in my heels in that one with my circle of friends. I'm not watching that one. And they're like, really? And I'm like, no. And I had one friend in particular who kept trying, to the point where there were several times I saw him and he'd bring the Blu-ray with him and like put it on the coffee table and stuff like that. And then he like tried to he hid it in my car and he thought it was funny. And I was just like, what is this? Like, this is not to say like this is a boundary or something like that, but it's like, it's something I brought up several times. Like, I don't want to see it. And it's like, it's just never going to happen. Yeah, that didn't go very well. But
a lot of people love it. I don't want to, I don't want
yeah,
to
exactly.
and be like, yeah, Jack literally gave it 5 star, like, valid to everyone. It wasn't for me. I think it's a 3-pronged issue with, really a 2-pronged issue, but like with a 0.5, let's say. I think the 0.5 is that he started to be more confident in using his voice to discuss politics, which I think is not, I don't even want to say he's not successful with it, but I think that, at least by judging by Beau's Afraid, and we'll see with Eddington, which is like all politics, I think my political views do not necessarily align with his political views, which causes like a rift for me. But I think the 2 big things is, number one, and it was fascinating seeing Midsommar and seeing what got left in the theatrical cut and what got cut from the director's cut. I think this was like a project that really gave him permission that he can be more vague. He doesn't need to explain things. He can go more abstract and creative, and people will be along for the ride. And he's A24 there. Shout out A24, doing a lot of great work. But they are not a company that is necessarily built around restraint or putting restraints on filmmakers. They will give Ari Aster like a huge budget for some reason to make this really wild feature, and like that they're going to lose money. It's not even like a question, are you going to lose money? But they will let him just go off the rails. And he also became a producer on his last 2 films, so more, rather than, he wasn't a producer on Hereditary or Midsommar, so more incentive and more creative control with himself. I think a combination of A24 and him deep diving into like, my voice is really important and I can be pretty vague in my films, really created, like, for me, a toxic blend. But again, people love Beau's Afraid, so more valid to you. I'm happy, at least I still have Midsommar, and I assume Hereditary. Have not seen Hereditary since I saw Beau's Afraid, but I'm very pleased with Midsommar, at least.
Yeah, I'm glad that you had that experience, because I think it can be a downer for anybody, especially people who love films, to return to something that they loved and rewatching again. They think, what is this? Or like, why did I like this? Which I have to say, it hasn't happened to me very often, but when it does, I think that I just kind of chalk it up like, I think I must have grown as a person or something, because this isn't doing it for me. But yeah, I mean, I mentioned Peter Bogdanovich before, who, had his first 3 mainstream releases were very successful and critically acclaimed. And then after that, I think that it's, in his case, it was about being unchecked and really, starting to, it's the kind of the same thing. Like, my voice is important and I can do whatever I want and I have the license to do it. But sometimes you need those checks and balances. You need those people. Like, you're going up to producer level, sometimes those producers are there to keep you in check, like maybe this isn't a good idea, or we don't have the money for that, or this is going to make the project a lot more messy for whatever reason. Sometimes you just need someone to read a screenplay. A lot of times with these directors, and this isn't talked about a lot, like their wives are very instrumental because they'll read the screenplay and they'll be like, honey, this is shit, you know? And you don't even know these women's names. But if you dig in these interviews, they're like, well, my wife read it and told me to rewrite it or gave me suggestions. And it's just like, they need those sounding boards. I don't know if Ari Aster has that or if that's even an issue with him. I know with Peter Bogdanovich, if you go down that rabbit hole, there's a very, very obvious reason why people think that his work had a switch down the line, and it's very fascinating. I'd recommend going into that and reading about it if you want to find out more about how a director can start struggling quite quickly. But I think that this one is the tip top for me. I'd actually kind of think that with the way things are going is that this is going to be someone who's going to continue to make things, and he's going to have his fan base, and they're going to like what he does no matter what he does. But I think that in my case, I think this is the only one that has resonance for me, or that I'll rewatch and I like to talk to people about it, obviously.
For sure. No, I think I'm with you there. So I think that pretty much is wrapping it up. I think we both would recommend you, if you've somehow got to this point and not seen the film, kind of shame on you.
Wow,
I think we'd
why are you listening to this?
Yeah, we kind of ruined the film for you. But maybe if you are trying to get a friend into Midsommar and you're a big Midsommar fan and you're watching this, I think we both would recommend starting with the theatrical cut. I would really, really, again, recommend then you switch to directors. Going forward, I will pretty much exclusively, I assume, be watching the director's cut. But very well done, and one of the more I would say worthwhile extended editions. It's not just like, for anyone who's unaware, it's not just like 4 minutes of like a bonus scene or a single scene. Like, it really drastically changes the projection of the feature in a way that I thought was quite worthwhile, and I think Jack likes it better also, so I'd recommend it. With that, let's go to our question of the week, because Midsommar really represented, like, I would say, the height of A24 as a company. Shout out A24.
I actually agree. That is so strange. Yeah, because I think like that. I feel like that was the peak where it's like, man, that film was really, really good. And since then, it's been a mixed bag. I have to remind my friends to like, oh, like they say like, oh, like this trailer has A24 on it, that means therefore it is good, and I will go see it. And I have to remind them, like, we saw this one, and you didn't like it, and they're like, oh, you're right. It doesn't mean everything they make is Midsommar.
It's so odd. We could do a whole podcast
talking about
A24. Yes, like in 2019, when this released, they are where neon is right now. Mm-hmm. And it's very odd that since this moment, A24 again, and we don't need to get into it. Like, I know there was a pandemic and everything. They've just gone so off the rails. But this was, I think, like the peak of like quality mixed with social perception. People were excited like July 4th weekend to go and see this movie because it was A24, because it was Ari Aster. Not something you can say about a lot of films now from either party. But I'm curious, what is your favorite A24 film? Again, a long filmography, some really, really great films within there. What has stuck out to you, Hillary?
This was very hard. And then I actually looked at my film library and I realized I have 17 A24 films in my library. They're not the ones that people think, or like, they're like, oh, I bet that's in our library. It's like, no, it's probably the ones that people are like, really? Yeah, that one? Or the ones that they're not even aware that they're A24 to begin with. Strangely enough, this is so, like, my immediate answer to that, like if I was, approached on the streets, like, what's your favorite A24 film? My favorite one, and this might really make people like curl their toes, I really liked Men. And it's not for the reason that people think. Because, I mean, it actually goes hand in hand with this film where it's like, I'd say like, yeah, my favorite film is Men. It's like, oh, she probably, has had horrible relationships. She just went through a messy breakup, something like that. And I have a very specific, strange reading on Men that I don't think anyone else has. But I did really feel there was something compelling about that film. I just kept going back to the theater and seeing it over and over again. And I guess the simplest way to put it is that I really identify with a character that it seems like no matter who she's encountering, it's always the same person. And they're all just her and Danny could be in a support group together for various reasons, but just very much, just like not getting what she needs, and the people around her are making everything worse when things are already pretty bad. That really resonated with me in 2022. But I mean, there's other ones I just wanted to mention along with them. I really love Locke. People aren't. It's just Tom Hardy in a car. I watched it recently. I love that film. I don't think it's known as an A24 film. It was kind of before it hit its zenith and became, I don't want to say like a household term or like a household name, but before it became, it started getting attention. And of course, Moonlight. Oh my God, Moonlight and After Sun. After Sun absolutely destroyed me. I had to have a therapy session after that and talk about some really difficult things that were related to that film. And a recent one I saw that I don't think people have talked about a lot is All Dirt Road's Taste of Salt. I've just, I mean, I saw that and I saw Nickel Boys pretty close to each other. And I was like, man, like black filmmakers. I know everyone's talking about Sinners, and Sinners is great. Don't get me wrong. But man, shortly before he died, Michael K. Williams was interviewed and he was talking about how, as black filmmakers, black actors, black creatives, black anything, you can't get anything done. And he was getting to that point where he said, like, they're not letting us sit at the table. And he's like, fuck them. We're going to build our own table. And if anyone's listening to this who's black, or if anyone who knows somebody who's black who's out there in the arts, you're building a beautiful table. You're building such a fucking amazing table, and you don't deserve to sit. I mean, we don't deserve to sit at the table. Your table is awesome. Keep building it. And like Michael K. Williams said, I don't know if he said it outright, but the gist was fuck them. Just make your own stuff. And there's some great stuff out there. So that was my long-winded answer to A24, and then it segued into black people.
Hey,
just keep
great
making
filmmakers,
great shit. Yes,
please.
please.
No, both those examples you bring up are brilliant. I'll go through some of the usual suspects, I guess. Like, obviously, I love First Reformed, Swiss Army Man, Lady Bird, Iron Claw. I saw TV Glow, Queer, A Ghost Story. But I did want to shout out a few, a little bit down my list. I think some people probably ignored or haven't seen yet. 20th Century Women, I think, is brilliant. It's a film that still, like, I need to rewatch. I've not rewatched it forever, but it still, like, touches me in my life in certain ways I find really powerful. We did a Patreon episode, God, like years ago, for how to talk to girls at parties. I still really appreciate that. Close is like brutal. Mama is fantastic.
Oh yes, I love Earth Mama. That's another black filmmaker. That's another one in that can where, like, what a beautiful table.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The Souvenir Part 2 specifically, I think, is great. I really appreciate, God, where are they? Woman Walks Ahead, I believe it's called. That's a really great film, I would say. So it's like A24 definitely has a really strong backlog. Even a lot of the smaller ones that you haven't heard of, I think, are really quite spectacular. The Eternal Daughter is fantastic. Mid-90s I really enjoy.
I loved the mid-90s, I have to admit.
Yeah, it's a good one. So the Children Act, that's a tiny one no one saw. Last Black Man in San Francisco.
Oh my God,
certain elements of that didn't age well, but like,
no, isn't that a shame?
Film.
I love that film, but now it's like I have to stare at you the whole film.
No, and genuinely one of my favorite performances maybe of all time. I remember walking out of the theater, can tell you exactly the theater I saw that in, and being like, wow, he is a revelation. And now it's like,
what a disappointment.
What a disappointment.
Yeah, but I mean, sometimes, people can be brilliant, but, there's a lot of other brilliant people out there. So I feel very comfortable walking away from anyone at this point.
Agreed.
It's just like there's other people who are lining up right behind you who are probably brilliant too. So
yeah,
that's a great film though. Great. So, another one that I almost wrote down was Waves. That's another one. I love
Waves.
And people really don't like the second half of that film. What are you talking about? That second half of the film, I love that just as much, because it's all like the first half is all destruction that leads to the act that causes this issue, and then it's all about healing afterwards. And people don't like to watch healing. We need to get more into that. Watch something that is constructive. And Waves, the second half of that, is what a wonderful film.
It's a very it's ironic actually, because I believe it was A24 who also did a pretty, I would say, mid job adapting Native Son, but it really is in some ways a modern adaptation of Native Son
Mm-hmm.
in a way that I find to be really powerful. Not to take away, I think there's some very valid criticism on the film, but I adore Waves. I still have not seen his newest film. It's so sad. Like Waves, again, I think it was, let's say 2019, 2018, where I was like, oh my God, I love it. I can't see what he does next. Can't wait to see what he does next. And apparently his newest film is just terrible. I haven't seen it yet, but
Neither have I. I did
give it a
see a
go.
trailer for it. I think I might have been before Warfare.
Mm,
And I think I remember talking to someone after. I was like, I can't believe they let The Weeknd write something again after The Idol, but they let him do it. And
yeah,
well, the thing is, I think that Trey Edward Schultz is going to be okay. Like
I
no matter
agree.
what he does, like this film is just it's a blip. I think he was brought in there. It's not necessarily his baby. It was The Weeknd's baby.
And that's the conversation. No one's like, oh my God, the Edward Schultz film sucks. Everyone's like,
Oh,
the
everyone's just
Weekend's
going
film
after him.
sucks.
Please
Yeah.
stop. Just step away for a while. Good sir. We've had
I do
enough.
think he's a phenomenal filmmaker overall, so I do agree he'll be okay. But like, still after 6 years, it's like, oh, you sell me on that, and this is what it is. How tragic. But I guess that's also my long answer for a favorite A24 film. Fascinated. Go on social media. Tell us what your favorite A24 films are. Again, there's plenty here we haven't discussed.
Oh yeah.
We haven't even mentioned like Yorgos Lanthimos' films. Again, there's so much
Oh my
here.
God, that's
Um,
true. There's so
you,
much. There's just a lot. That's why it was so hard. I mean, I wrote down just
oh
a
yeah.
couple. I think five. But yeah, there's a lot.
There's a great I'm sure someone's already doing this, but if anyone at home wants to start a podcast, great podcast ideas to go through and review every single A24 film. Again, I'm sure that's out there. I'm sure it's a YouTube video, even
Oh yeah.
like an 8-hour YouTube video. I'm sure it's there, but like I would be fascinated. There's so much to get into within this
It'd be a
group of
rocky start
films.
because I think the first one was that like Roman Coppola Charlie Sheen project was the first
Yep.
thing they put out. It's like this is like no one would have known back then.
Let's be clear. It would
No
take like
one.
20 episodes to get to like good, but
Yeah.
there's some gems in there. Like you mentioned, Locke. I think wasn't Bling Ring A24. I believe it was.
Another one we
Um,
forgot is Uncut Gems. Like the
oh
Safdie
my
brothers
gosh, yeah.
are they're distributed through A24. So I mean, some things kind of get lost in the wash. It's such a wide ranging conversation.
High
And then of
Life
course
is
the ones
in
that are not
there.
great. Oh, High Life. That's one of the ones that I have, and I've had some people. I've told people like to watch, and I'm like, but there's like a big caveat with that. It's just like it's not for everybody.
Yeah,
But I just like watching Robert Pattinson and a baby. He's so good with kids. I'm so happy he became a dad because it does seem like
yeah,
he genuinely like the films where he's worked with children. He really likes working with kids, and you can see that on screen. So good for him, just in his personal life. Don't know, I'm not like a rabid fan or anything, but I'm glad that he's
right.
happy. I hope he's happy anyway.
I think he is. With that, Hillary, it is Pride Month. So one thing I'm doing on this podcast, and you've already, I've mentioned in multiple episodes, I don't know if you've been listening, I've mentioned your list that you created for our Pride special not even a few years ago. Oh my
Oh
God, maybe
yeah.
like 5 years ago. That's insane. Let's not think about that together. Um, wow, that's crazy. But you have that brilliant list of recommendations that you've already created for us. But for Pride Month, every time there's someone new on the podcast, I just want to ask them, what is an LGBTQ plus recommendation you have for us to all to check out? Because there are so many great films out there, and I think everyone has their own little gems that they know of. So what film would you recommend?
I have to admit I cheated on this one too. I mean, I couldn't boil it down to just one. I do have another episode and I will tag it with the I'll put a tag on it on Letterboxd for Clapper. It's called Gay Romances That Don't Make My Eyes Roll or Bleed. So, I will definitely yeah, I think you just have to type that into Letterboxd, and that list will come up. Gay romances that don't make my eyes roll or bleed. There's a lot of stuff in there, but I wrote down, I think it's five again, like five recommendations just off the top of my head. The first one that came to mind is this Vietnamese film that I don't think very few people have seen. It's called Song Lang. Oh my God. What a heartbreaking film. So I don't want to say any more about that, but it's a romance between I think like an organized crime enforcer and an opera singer. These two men who don't know each other. And yeah, I think you just have to look at the reviews that are on Letterboxd, and it's just like I'm crying a thousand oceans right now, that kind of stuff. And then I thought of Blue Jean right away. One of my oh, I don't want to spoil it. There's a certain scene in there. It's a certain type of scene. It's like it's my favorite that type of scene ever, and it has to do with being gay. Um, and then I of course I love Show Me Love. I just really love that. That's Lucas Moodysson, I believe. That was before Lilia Forever, I think. Just these two young girls like figuring out that they can be a couple. And then I recently saw Marlon Riggs' Tongues Untied. For some reason, all of Marlon Riggs' stuff got put onto Canopy, which is, like a library streaming service. I can't recommend watching his stuff enough. You'll learn a lot, especially from the perspective of being a gay Black man during the AIDS epidemic, which is important. And then the last one I'll mention, it did not make my gay romances that don't make my eyes roll or bleed, but it's just compelling all the same. And I believe it's A24 as well. I think it is. Love Lies Bleeding. Holy crap. That is a very gay movie. And I've enjoyed it quite a bit. So those are my recommendations for Pride Month. All over the place, but something for everybody.
Yes, no, great recommendations. Thank you so much for those. With that, I think that's going to do it today for the podcast. Thank you so much, Hillary, for joining today, discussing Midsommar with me. I thought this was a fun episode, and I'm really happy to revisit this film. Happy just Midsummer to everyone. Hope you're enjoying today if you're watching.
Don't be jumping off any cliffs or burning people. That's not a part of Midsommar. Just maypoles, okay?
No burning, no jumping off cliffs, no drugging people, no incest.
Yeah, none of that. Sticking body limbs into your garden for fertilizing reasons or whatever with runes on them. No, just
only dancing around the maypole. That's all.
Yeah, a six-pack and a lawn chair. Come on, guys. We're American. Well, we're Americans, so that's what we imported in June and July.
Absolutely. With that, Hillary, where can we find your writing online? Where can we find you online?
I usually say find me on Letterboxd, but I'm going to try something different. I have a link tree. If you just type into your browser or on your phone, campsite.bio/Degelle, Degelle, that'll bring up my link tree, and Letterboxd is on there as well as everything else. There's my blog. I recently wrote a piece on trigger warnings and how I feel about them, which I'm sure would not make everybody happy. It is quite a roller coaster to read. It's long. I keep trying to write stuff that's simple, and it's just been getting long. So I apologize. And I'm working on another video editing project that has to do with Anna May Wong that may show up at some point over the coming weeks. But yeah, campsite.bio/Degelle, Degelle. That's how you'll find me.
And you can find me on Blue Sky and Letterboxd, just Carson Timar, writing at Clapper. Cannot wait to check that out about trigger warning. I have so many features I want to write about that I have on my list. I just need to sit down. It's finally summer, so it's I just need to sit down, a nice glass of wine and just write one evening. I have so many ideas, and every film just keeps giving me more ideas. I'm like, please stop. I just need to catch up with everything I want to write. But yeah, you can find me online there, and obviously on ClapperCast. We're in the summer movie season. Very fun. A lot of fun stuff coming out. New releases, old releases, all that good stuff. So you can continue to find me on the podcast every week. Thank you so much for listening and watching. Goodbye.